Congressman Joe Sestak is with us on the Big Talker 1210. Hey, Congressman, welcome in.
Great to be back. Thanks, Tom.
Well, I did see you, and I wanted the dust to settle a little bit. I guess it was one of the first nights with Chris Matthews and some others around this. What's your overall view? You do find this to be the appropriate venue?
Sure. We have tried twice in our military tribunals to bring terrorists to justice, and twice the Supreme Court has said no. We've tried to fix these tribunals. The defense authorization bill that just passed, time's a wasting. The administration has said there's probably 20-plus terrorists that we don't have enough evidence to bring either before a tribunal or a civilian court, so we're not going to release them. We're going to hold them down there till we figure out what to do. But they said, we've got the evidence on this guy, and this guy's going to come, and he's going to be brought to justice, as 200 other terrorists have been over the past 8 years, right there in New York City as a sign of our strongest resolve that we cannot let terrorists bend our principles, that we're a nation of laws, not of men. And so I am supportive of this.
All right, one thing there about this and the certitude of he'll get his just punishment, as you know, New York jurors are very reluctant to give the death penalty, and I think if anybody deserves it, it would be Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
Understand. I think that capital punishment is something that it should be given. This is a murderer that we had do this. But then again, we permit our juries to decide, much as we do in a military tribunal. But right now, those tribunals have failed. They haven't had passed the litmus test of the Supreme Court. Now, you can agree or disagree, but at the end of the day, the Supreme Court is the arbiter of what the laws of the land are as far as interpretation.
Well, excuse me, but Congressman, wasn't the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, he's admitted his guilt. I thought the trial was going on. I played some sound for it, and I thought we stopped it because we wanted to reassess, not because the Supreme Court said we couldn't do this hybrid.
No, the Supreme Court has determined that we did not have the proper setup in the military court system. What it said in its second hearing is that those who are brought forward in the military tribunals commissions are to be accorded the same procedures as recognized by civilized people. For example, hearsay. At first, hearsay was permitted to be brought. We don't even bring hearsay in UCMJ, Uniform Code of Military Justice and Court Martials, but it was permitted to be brought forward. You know, that's not what's going to be permitted by the Supreme Court. So that got changed, but that was before we were after the fact that we decided to stop the tribunals until we got them fixed because of the Supreme Court.
All right, well, let's talk about the unwieldiness of this. Miranda rights, change of venue. This Khalid Sheikh Mohammed maybe having 1.5 to 2 years as his own attorney, getting sensitive intelligence documents, going on a propaganda tirade. Don't those things concern you?
Well, not at all. Look, we have the Classified Information Procedures Act, and in fact, the military tribunals go through almost the same exact procedures so that you can have protective orders given at all times in order to have redacted summaries to protect classified information. And as you know, military tribunals are open to the public just the same as they are in the open court. In a military tribunal, the only difference is that there's a glass wall in between, and it's in an audio that's delayed about 40 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's open. Now, you don't have cameras in there, but you don't have cameras in civilian courts either. And so you have the same access to the public in both of them.
Now, in addition to the Supreme Court, is Congressman Joe Sestak in the camp that says we have something to prove to the rest of the world by doing this?
I think the only thing that we have to show is that no one, no terrorist, will ever let us forsake our ideals, that this is a nation where justice will prevail. I want them brought forward. I want justice done. I was stationed at the Pentagon when 9/11 happened. Because 6 months earlier I changed my office to take over a new section, 13 men in my last section, 30 yards away, who used to work for me, passed away that day. I can't wait till they're brought there. And to my mind is I defended for 31 years, including head of that terrorism unit that I then was assigned to take over after they struck the Pentagon, went on the ground, shaped policy to pursue these perpetrators, and we've waited too long for our system to bring them to justice. But all those years, Dom, I protected this nation, people, yes, but the ideal that laws prevail. We're not like any other country. We're not a country of black holes that other countries have done, and that's our ultimate strength.
We're talking with Congressman Joe Sestak about the trial of KSM. Did you happen to see the exchange with Lindsey Graham and the Attorney General? And I thought that the Attorney General did not seem to be able to answer Graham, who, as you know, is a JAG officer, talking about that we're making history here for no good reason.
I did not, but please, if you want.
Well, sure. And Congressman, the point that he made, though, I guess, is opposite your point. He saw no precedent, no reason that this could not be done in a military tribunal, and that we have not done it before, and we shouldn't start doing this now.
I had heard. I was on another show where that was brought up, and I wish I'd seen the exact exchange, and I owed it to you because I'd heard about it, and I should have gone to see it before I came on. But I disagree. There is... And Holder has said, and I can send you the document because I did hear about this and I had my staff research it, that we have done this in civilian courts, if I understand the question correctly, over 200 times in the last 8 years. We have about 217 international terrorists that are in our supermax prisons today in the United States. President Bush, on June 9th, 2005, actually said in a press conference that he believed that we should bring these perpetrators to court in the United States. And I'll send you that quote.
Okay, I would love to have that. Can you stand by and we'll take some callers for you?
Absolutely.
Okay, we have Congressman Joe Sestak with us, and we're going to start to take your calls here on the Big Talker 1210. Let me go back to the Congressman, and let's go to Greg. Greg is in Center City on the Big Talker 1210. Greg, you're on with Congressman Joe Sestak. Go right ahead.
Okay, hi, Dom. How are you?
Good.
I am really very upset when the congressman and many of his allies keep saying that if we do not try this terrorist war criminal in front of a civilian jury, we will betray the country's traditions. Military commissions go back at least to the post-World War II era. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was all prepared to plead guilty before a commission. I don't know what's going on here, and if the admiral, congressman, and the president and the attorney general are so concerned about upholding the country's traditions, why does the president and the attorney general continue to insist on their confidence of a guilty verdict? I mean, after all, criminal defendants are presumed innocent.
And I might add to Greg's point, Congressman, before you respond, and I think Eric Holder I think it was Eric Holder said, well, we'll charge him with other things, essentially, if he gets off from this from this trial.
Look, was it Greg?
Yes.
Greg, were you opposed to the 200 terrorists that the Bush administration brought forward in civilian courts?
I am not exactly certain what the circumstances of all of those proceedings were. I don't know if that was during a time when the commissions were suspended or not. But
no, Moussaoui, the 20th hijacker, for example, was tried in civilian court. And I guess that's an unfair question on my part. But my issue is that the tradition has been to bring terrorists into the civilian courts. That has been the tradition. And as I said, 217 international terrorists are actually incarcerated now that have gone through the civilian court system. So I think we've just been following precedents on this. The unfortunate thing about the military commissions as tribunals as they were constituted in the last administration was that they were deemed not to be constitutionally established and had suspended wrongly according to the Supreme Court, some of the due process in terms of having expediency rule over fairness. I don't want to give any break to these guys, but I never forget the time I was on the ground in Afghanistan, and they brought forward, and this isn't the case in this one, but as the guys brought in some of the troops brought in some of their captured prisoners, and Dom, I may have told you this before, one of them was banging his head against the stockade after a while, and I said to the soldiers, what gives with him? And said, we pay $2,000 a bounty to the local tribal chiefs for Al Qaeda or Taliban. They give us they're people who are mentally deranged and claim they're Taliban. He's probably just one of those. Well, we had to release about 600 people from Gitmo because we found they were one of those. And so my take is I do not feel we portray. What I feel is that we actually reinforce what our nation stands for under the rule of law. We've done that for 200 terrorists so far. Our system, I have great faith in, will do this the right way.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Unfortunately, the military tribunals haven't worked here, the two we've tried.
Let's go through Kevin in Radnor on the Big Talker 1210. Kevin, go right ahead.
Yeah, Congressman Sestak, you said, Congressman Holder said the other day that he was going to have some of the coal bombers tried in the military tribunals. You said that we weren't able to do military tribunals because of the Supreme Court. Why are we able to do the coal bombers in that court but not New York? And won't that create a situation where if we do bomb a major city that we give people an audience and a potential to talk about their cases in front of a larger audience and incent people to bomb the United States as opposed to military targets overseas?
If you mean the publicity that can accrue, in a military tribunal, it's open to the public just like it is to a civilian court. There's the same access that's given to the public in both of them. Your other question had to do with, and I'm sorry, the very first part of that had to do with, Don, are you still on the line?
Yes, yeah, go right ahead.
Go right ahead,
yeah.
Yeah, the coal bombers
coal bombers.
Right. Yes.
Yes. What they said is he is going to bring the coal bombers who did their outrageous act overseas in a theater of war, is going to bring them before the military tribunal. Now, the military tribunal he's bringing them before will be the third reconstituted one. I was involved in the drafting of the new legislation after the Supreme Court in 2008. It did once in 2006, once in 2008, told us what had been done was unconstitutional. So we tried to recraft it to try to meet the needs of the Supreme Court or interpretation. We hope we have it right. Whereas my concern is we may bring these individuals before it and we find out that its appeal goes to the Supreme Court and we don't have it right. One of those was the Hearsay Act. Before, you could say the commission could be, some prosecutor bring forth it hearsay and didn't have to prove whether it was valid or not. Now they're going to have to show, that it does have some validity as they bring forward. We tightened up those types of rules.
All right. Thank you very much for the call. Let me go to another one. Bill in Haddonfield, you're on the Big Talker 1210 with Congressman Sestak. Hi, Bill.
Good evening, Don. Good evening, Congressman.
Hi, good evening, Joe.
Thank you. Fine. Joe, I think part of the problem with the argument on the side of defending Attorney General Holder's decision was that you keep referring to these people as terrorists, and the example that you fall back on is the Moussaoui trial as an example of how this can be handled. KSM is not just a terrorist, he's an enemy combatant. And I think that's an important distinction to make, and that's a fact that isn't in dispute here. He's actually classified as an enemy combatant. And going to Lindsey Graham's point earlier in his questioning of Attorney General Holder, when was the last time that we tried an enemy combatant in civilian court?
And Congressman Sestak, he couldn't answer, Eric Holder could not answer that question. That's what I was telling you.
Yeah, I see.
Graham answered it for him. It's never been done. We're making history here.
Well, there was never the term enemy combatant until the Bush administration invented it. There was only see, there's a term for international law and a term for national law. And so no one knew how to characterize terrorists. No one had ever done it. So the Bush administration invented this term called enemy combatant. And because they invented that term, they were in limbo, legal limbo, because an enemy combatant, we don't normally, there's no international law definition of international in the Geneva Conventions. So that permitted them to place them at Gitmo outside U.S. jurisdiction to hold them there as long as they foresaw. So you're right. Up until 2001, there was no precedence for enemy combatant on that. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Moussaoui is one of the enemy combatants.
I
but
thought
I'd have to get back
I thought
and re-verify it. But
Moussaoui was.
We're going through a new term
Right.
now that has never, ever had a precedence before.
But Congressman Sestak, I don't hear Eric Holder. Here's where you're differing from him, and that's why this is a little bit of a different argument. I don't hear him saying we couldn't do this with the military tribunals. He's making this a choice argument that the only way to do this fairly before the world, he seems to be saying, when you boil everything else away, is not these military tribunals, certainly not at Gitmo and secretive and all that. He's saying it's more of a choice here.
Yeah, well, first off, I think we're stronger if we can do it because, look, I consider these people murderers. I have to tell you something. I find what they did was strictly murder. And so I'm very comfortable of having them. You're almost giving them too much dignity to call them a combatant.
All right, well, let me play this out then. How are you?
I like the civilian one.
Sure.
But number two is I'm very concerned that the military tribunal may not hold up a third time, and I want them brought to justice now.
Yeah, but here's the thing. They may be found innocent, as hard as that is to believe, because of the alleged torture, the waterboarding, and other things.
No, but waterboarding and torture are illegal to be brought forward in the military tribunal also. You cannot bring forward waterboarding and torture in a military tribunal either.
No, but in the civilian court, they will be able to bring this up, and that is going to be something that's going to be very difficult.
You can bring it up in the military tribunal. There are very small differences between the two.
Yes,
this is not the uniform code.
But the difference is, I have more trust in guys like you sitting there in a military tribunal, to be honest, than I do in a jury in New York. As far as ultimately convicting these guys, I mean, Congressman, the people I talk with think there's a 1 in 10 chance that this guy may be able to walk from this.
See, the reason I feel very strongly confident about this is, as I said at the beginning of the interview, the Obama administration has let it be known that there's a certain number of terrorists that's not going to go to any court because we just don't have the evidence, but we know they're too dangerous. And so they got to determine what they're going to do with them. They wouldn't bring this one forward unless they had the intelligence by other means, such as intelligence gathering, to convict this guy. Why would they do that when they know they're not going to bring others forward?
Let me play the argument, too, that I think is the weakest after this argument, the net effect of this in the Arab world, et cetera. Now, you're more well-traveled than I am. I would concede that. But it just seems to me, from what we know, this guy will have a platform, Congressman, as opposed to Al Jazeera and these others saying, boy, look at the Americans, look how fair, look how strong their system is. And when the waterboarding and everything else comes up, I don't see a net effect that the rest of the world, particularly the Arab world, is going to say, wow, this is a great country that's fair.
Well, there's not a question that there is going to be efforts and very strong efforts to politicize this, whether it's done in a military tribunal, which is as open to the public as it is in civilian court. I have to emphasize that, just like the Nuremberg trials was open to the public. And so there's going to be the same ability to publicize. Now, I do believe this strongly, that ultimately bringing them to court in a civilian court is a stronger sense of our resolve than not bringing them forward, because that prison in Gitmo is actually creating more terrorists outside its walls than we can hold inside its walls.
All right, we know that. Let me take one more caller for Congressman Joe Sestak. Joe's on a cell. Joe, you're on with Congressman Joe Sestak. Go right ahead.
Hi, Joe.
Good evening, Dom. Good evening, Admiral.
Joe, thanks. Thanks. It's a better term than Congress.
I
love the Navy
because I spent 20 years in the military.
Thank you for your service,
sir. Thank you, but I have to say, former constituent in Delco, you really upset me the way you're talking. I've lost friends. I was in the Gulf War. I was in Panama. I've lost several friends. These are enemy combatants, okay? They were caught on enemy battlefields. They should be tried with a military tribunal, cut and dry. There is no way. They're going to use every loophole they can, and as Dom said, they're going to give them a stage, and they're going to use every loophole they can to get out of this. I don't care. They could try. Holder could try them with jaywalking, and they could still get out with it. It just really upsets me, Admiral, that you're taking this stand. I understand you're towing the party line, but it's just absolutely unreal that they're going to try these people where all them people were blocks from where all them people were killed, and you're just going along with it. Sir, with all due respect, that upsets me.
Well, first of all, thanks for your service again. Second, I want to make sure you understand, and Dom knows me enough by now, that I'm not doing this because of party line. I wouldn't be running against Arlen Specter, against my whole Democratic Party establishment, if I was a toady to the party. I'm in this, and I got in it for one reason, because I had great health care in the military, and I owed it their debt to get everybody the same type of access that my daughter had. That was my mission. Now, number two, I do respect your opinion, but my question has to come again. Why not the other 200 terrorists that we brought forward into these civilian courts? Why this one? Why was Moussaoui? Why wasn't there the same outrage at that one? Is it the change in the administration? What happened in June, and I had the wrong date, 2006, when President Bush said, I believe they should be brought to court ultimately in civilian court? See, my belief has always been those years I protected.
President Bush never said civilian court. He said court, which could have been a military tribunal is a court hearing.
If you can leave your email, I will send you. When he did a press conference on June 19th, 2006. He said, "Courts in the United States."
All right, Joe. Here's what I do. I'll put you on hold, and we'll get that email. And I know the congressman's people follow up on this, and we'll send it to you. Then we will talk.
And
about
I'm
it
not trying to hide behind President Bush.
Okay, I understand
that there was this whole belief why we brought all those other terrorists to our civilian courts because we felt the rule of the land was strong.
Joe, I must go, but I'll put you on hold, and we'll get that email, and we'll send it off to you.
Don, should I send it to you? Or?
Oh, yeah, send it to me, and we'll forward it to Joe. And
it's
Congressman,
the same one that I promised you.
Okay,
all right?
Parting comment. I haven't heard you on this, and that is simply this: the Fort Hood thing seems to us to be a complete breakdown because of fear of being accused of doing something discriminatory toward a Muslim soldier. I'm just reading two other things that have come over in the last hour that this major was allegedly involved in. What's your take on Fort Hood and the investigation?
I do. Oh, excuse me. I'm so glad when I heard today that my former boss, Admiral Vern Clark,
right,
Chief of Naval Operations, who tried to transform and change the Navy, but was truly is going to be is going to investigate what you're talking about, along with Togo West, former Secretary of the Army, and they're going to go right down what flags were missed, what weren't missed. And I know the CNO, and he is going to go through this, and I'm very glad about it. Now, I also think that people will be, if what you're saying was true, I think it's too far of a leap to take it from a small unit or a small, I guess they were psychiatrists working together, and say an great institution like the Army would ever be politically sensitive. I mean, overly politically sensitive. Look, those who wear the cloth of this nation, we know that we have to hold them under strict standards of good conduct, just and discipline. That's the kick in the stomach. How could one of those people become a murderer of our own? And we need to find out exactly why it is before we leap to large-scale institutional conclusions that anyone as an institution became overly politically sensitive.
Well, wait a minute. Let me ask you, though, Congressman, point on this, though. When General Casey, with 14 dead and 30-some wounded on national TV immediately after that on Meet the Press and Stephanopoulos, talks about the biggest casualty here could be diversity. A lot of our listeners, military people and others, and politicians I brought on, they were appalled by that's how far it goes. That was just inappropriate of him to be
the words I probably would have used was not the biggest casualty. I think I wish he had said is, we don't want the richness of our diversity to be harmed by this because it will turn out to be undue. Because we've all served with men, and at least I have served with men. I can't remember any women that were of the Muslim faith and were tremendous warriors. And I think he just meant to put a sense of caution. I'm not sure he should have said it is the worst casualty. The worst casualty is losing.
Absolutely. Congressman, thank you as always. We'll look forward to getting that email and to your next appearance.
All right, and I'll send it right off, Tom.
Thank you, Congressman. Thanks very much. Congressman Joe Sestak with us here on the Big Talker 1210.